YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back. Another wild day in the NFL. A bunch of roster moves. We had a Jalen Reagor trade, which we'll grade. We got signings, waiver claims, cuts, some surprising cuts. News happening as I'm talking. Things happen right before going to record. Just excited to break all of it down. A similar video as the one is last night. If you haven't seen that, check it out. Rocking the Vikings chain today from Shop GLD. My Vikings made somewhat of a splash trade with that Jalen Reagor deal there, but check out Shop GLD. There's a link down below. There's a code that you can use, GOAT, for 33% off real gold, NFL pendants, non-NFL stuff as well. But NFL players wear their stuff. Micah Parsons, Aaron Jones, Tyreek Hill, pretty cool. So check it out. Pretty affordable, cool stuff there. Link down below. Don't forget to use that code GOAT. Like, subscribe, turn notifications on. Full NFL coverage here. Season starts next week. I am pumped. Then make sure you check out our Twitter too, because there's live updates. Things I'm going to talk about in this video have already been talked about for the most part there. So always talking during live games. Super followers getting that bonus content as well. So I'm ranking the top waiver claims. So these aren't just the signings of the waiver claims here. So the Bears made quite a few of them here. They made quite a few waiver claims, and I got them at number 1, picking up Armon Watts. The Vikings surprisingly waived Armon Watts yesterday. It was a big surprise because I thought he could start for him. He's a solid young defensive tackle that can also play the nose position, kind of can play all over the place across the defensive line, and he was pretty productive as a key rotation guy last year. Maybe start this year, but they trade for Ross Blacklock. They cut Watts, and Watts has been fitting the Vikings 4-3. And the Bears are now running a 4-3, so that definitely helps that, you feel a little bit better about the scheme fit there. But the Bears kind of needed some interior guys. Remember, they lost Akeem Hicks. Eddie Goldman retired, obviously. They lost him, then he retired after signing with the Falcons. But so they're going to use Armon Watts. That was a big-time pickup there for them. Texans got to be in the number 2 spot with Tyler Johnson. Yeah, Tyler Johnson needs to develop more, needs to get better. There's been some disappointing moments even with Tom Brady, but he's a solid young receiver that had a phenomenal career at Minnesota in college. But the Texans badly needed a receiver. This is and it's a young group that are still progressing, developing. So it makes a lot of sense. It's a good pickup there for the Houston Texans, needing a receiver. The Bears, again, with Alex Leatherwood, which is just kind of a boomer bust pickup here. And I like it if they play him at guard. I wouldn't put him in the top 5 if they're playing him at tackle, because I just don't like him as a tackle. Never did. He hasn't looked good. Just doesn't have the quickness for it. Just feels like he actually could be a pretty good guard. So it's that's why it's boom or bust. You go from one extreme to another there. So I hope he's a guard. This one's probably debatable. People probably don't agree that it's a top-tier waiver claim, because a lot of us thought maybe he would pass through waivers because the guarantees that come with his contract, because he's still on that first-round pick rookie deal. So it is risky for the Bears. I like them taking a shot, but again, I don't love it if they play him at tackle. I like him a lot more at guard, like his upside there. Good run blocker, physical dude, doesn't really have the quickness and speed. That's why it was a little surprising, too, because when the Bears hired the new staff, specifically Ryan Poles, the GM, it felt like they were preaching like quickness and speed when it comes to offensive linemen. The game has changed, and so I didn't think Leatherwood really fit his philosophy there. Unless he plays, guard, then I suppose he can kind of fit that. So, interesting one. And, apparently most teams expected him to clear waivers, but he did not. Falcons get Chuma Odoga, the offensive tackle from the Jets, who struggled when he's got an opportunity to play a little bit, but he has experience. That's great. Teams always looking for offensive linemen, and it's a bonus if they have experience. Just didn't work out with the Jets. The Falcons, perhaps he can work out with Arthur Smith in that offensive scheme there, and they were in need of some competition at the right tackle position with Caleb McGarry. So there was trade discussions. Teams were calling, including the Cowboys, about trading for Adoga. They couldn't reach a deal, so when that stuff happens and the guy's cut, it feels like a team like the Cowboys are taking their chances. They think they can get him off waivers. Well, the Falcons got him, so kind of was sought out after there, so the Falcons scoop him up. Bengals, number 5, Max Sharping, kind of like Adoga, like he's got his chances, he's got the experience. He struggled a little bit, but I like to change the scenery here. I like him going to the Bengals, who upgraded their starters, but definitely need some better depth. And you get a guy, Max Sharping, who was a pretty decent tackle prospect from Northern Illinois that was moved to guard, and he's got experience playing there, but I like the versatility as well as a key depth guy for the Cincinnati Bengals, so maybe some upside there. In a bonus one, I want to talk about Browns picking up Kellen Mond. Mond, I still think he has some upside there because he has the arm talent in terms of the strength, and he has the athletic ability. He's kind of got to brush up on some mechanics and decision-making, kind of get him a little more comfortable and confident. So he goes to the Browns, who run a West Coast style offense, which from Stefanski was running that in Minnesota. Minnesota was running that even when Stefanski left, and when they drafted Kellen Mond, there was only 1 year of that, and they kind of changed things up this year. So my point is, it does seem like somewhat of a system fit there with the Browns, and it kind of feels like an ideal, if he progresses and develops further, it feels like an ideal Deshaun Watson backup for the future. That's kind of the ideal future. Watson 1, Mond 2, if he can figure it out, because right now he's not a 2. But, yeah, I like the idea of that. And there was some more interesting waiver wire pickups. We have all of them on our Twitter. We talked about quite a few of them and more there, so check that out. But best signings, Kenyon Drake, which we kind of knew about yesterday, but he officially signed in an hour or two ago, pretty recently. I like the fit with the Ravens. Ravens get better at that running back group. Then you factor in that they have Gus Edwards on the PUP list. J.K. Dobbins, is he 100%? Maybe not, but he's got to be close. They didn't put him on any injury list, so that's good. And they have Mike Davis, but you get better with Drake there, and he can get some touches early on. I like the Packers picking up Rudy Ford. We talked about the safety was one of the more interesting cuts yesterday, one of the best available as a veteran free agent. He was made a free agent yesterday after the Jaguars cut him, but he's inconsistent in the past, like where he would struggle a little bit, but then he would have a really good game. So you want to get more of that out of him, and he goes to a really good secondary at the Packers, who have a really good starting group. Their depth is pretty bad, though, for a very good group there. So they get really good depth, but there's kind of two areas they're bad on with, the depth in some spots, like the secondary, because it's a very good team, and the second area is special teams, and Rudy Ford happens to be a very good special teamer, so it helps the Packers in multiple ways. I think kind of an underrated player here. Chargers had Sony Michel, running back, obviously was cut with the Dolphins, crowded room. He's had spent some time and had some good reps with the Patriots and the Rams, obviously, won 2 Super Bowls. So that helps to have a guy like that in there, and Chargers definitely can use another guy to possibly contend for that running back 2 spot. So it's only going to help them, really. And the Giants bringing in Tony Jefferson, the safety from the Ravens, who actually played under new defensive coordinator Don Martindale, new Giants defensive coordinator. And they've kind of been looking for more of that true, strong safety type in there. So it's a pretty good fit, and he'll get some playing time early on. And the Bengals get out O.J. Howard, who's been disappointing for the Bills to get rid of him and carry some dead cap. They must really not like him, so it's not a good sign, I suppose. But the Bengals definitely were in need of more of a athletic pass-catching tight end. Uzomah, who was kind of a all-around, like he can block and he can catch. He's not elite at either, but he's pretty good at both. They lost him. They got Hurst, who is more of a blocker, but can catch, under-the-radar guy catching the ball. And, so they kind of needed more of the athletic pass-catching type in Howard. So it actually helps them, I think, more than people think. And I probably would throw Bostic in here. I added Bostic to the last graphic, last second, because that happened pretty recently. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but he signed back with the Commanders. We'll talk about a little bit more here. Notable cuts. This one just happened. I had to plug this into the graphic that was already made, and you see the graphics guy had to plug it into the graphic, that was already made, and you see he spelled running back wrong, so we're messing up all over the place here. But Trey Sermon surprisingly cut by the 49ers. Which is a pretty deep running back room, and he was a little disappointing last year. But I guess it shouldn't be that shocking because they got a really deep running back room, and again, he didn't do much last year. But they move on from him. At this point, it's kind of surprising. Like if it would have happened yesterday, for some reason, it's kind of weird. But if it would have happened yesterday, it probably would have been. It probably would have been less surprising. You wait around a little bit, and I know that maybe there's somebody that's appealing to them that's available, but I just wasn't expecting to happen at this point today or going forward. So, still a prospect. Was a tough running back from originally Oklahoma, but then Ohio State, and had a really good year that last year, Ohio State. I like the Falcons a lot. Right away, I like the Falcons a lot for him. Just feels like an Arthur Smith-type running back there. But we'll see. There's a number of teams that could pick him up. Bears dropped Kyrus Tonga, who's a pretty solid nose tackle from BYU. When given a shot in preseason, really last year too, I thought he looked pretty solid. But it's a different staff in there, but he might get a shot somewhere. The Vikings, kind of another surprising cut from the Vikings. Amir Smith-Marset, who was a rookie last year, and when they put him in there at the end of the year, he looked pretty decent. Pretty speedy. But I guess trading for Jalen Reagor caused this, and then the new staff drafted Jalen Naylor late in this draft, so they chose the guy they drafted versus the last staff who they drafted. So, interesting. I think somebody will pick him up. There's a lot of teams that need receivers. There's a speedy guy with some upside. I think somebody will pick him up. Isaac Rochelle, who's been, a veteran that's been on some teams, played some solid ball for some teams. He kind of can play that 3-4 spot, maybe the 4-3 or the 4-3 technique. So you see the versatility a little bit as well. The Browns move on from him. I think they were trying him out more as a D end. I would like for maybe try him out inside more, but maybe they did during practice. The Ravens cut Tyree Phillips, who was a draft pick just a couple years ago, can play guard or tackle. That's a good thing as well. Probably more likely to be a guard, but can play both. So the versatile offensive lineman. Ravens got a pretty unique scheme, I suppose, in terms of the blocking scheme, because there's teams kind of that went away over the years from that type of power scheme. So maybe he fits, something outside of the Ravens, which is a lot of around the NFL. So that could be a good sign, and teams I think will be interested. So these guys go to waivers minus Rochelle because he's a veteran. He will be he's instantly a free agent. But the other guys go on waivers, and then that will be we'll do it again tomorrow. Like we'll see the waiver claims, and I think Tunga's kind of up in the air. Sermon, I definitely think he gets claimed. I think Smith-Marset. I think Sermon and Phillips definitely get claimed. I think Smith-Marset probably gets claimed as well. Tunga, I'm gonna go probably not. Somebody might sign him to their practice squad. And Rochelle maybe gets signed by an NFL team before the season starts or maybe early on in the year. So pretty interesting stuff there. And there's still guys available from yesterday. If you haven't seen yesterday's video, we have a load of this stuff. And there's still a lot of those guys available. And we had some trade candidates. But other news, and some of this just happened, but the Titans are going to work out Josh Gordon. Crazy if you remember that Josh Gordon led the NFL in receiving yards 2013. That's crazy to think about. Titans looking for another receiver there. He didn't work out with the Chiefs. Saints worked out a couple defensive linemen. A notable one there is Vernon Butler, who's been pretty solid throughout, somewhat solid throughout his NFL career. The Saints work good with those interior defensive linemen. I would like for them to sign him. I think he'd help him out, revive his career a little bit. Right before going to record this, Cowboys are going to eventually bring in Jason Peters. And I talked about this when Tyron Smith went down, that watch out for Jason Peters. I listed a couple other guys, but Jason Peters, it may be him. They're also going to try Tyler Smith, the rookie who used to play tackle, at tackle. So they're going to try all this out. Really think they wanted Odoga. They couldn't claim him. The Falcons got him. So interesting. And then the Panthers got trade calls on Robbie Anderson and Terrace Marshall. Marshall was just a rookie a year ago. Kind of your today's style big slot receiver. Pretty good in the red zone. At least he was at LSU, dealing with some minor injuries. So, and his last name's spelled wrong as well. I think the graphics guy's fired at this point. But Robbie Anderson, obviously a big-time receiver. I don't think the Panthers, because we've been hearing they want another receiver, and that ended up becoming true because they traded for Laviska Shenault, and then they called about Denzel Mims. Denzel Mims still available. So you could say, well, they wanted receivers. They got a receiver in Laviska Shenault, so they're good. Why would they get rid of one to need a receiver again? Or maybe they needed a receiver so they could trade Robbie Anderson. I think unlikely, but it could be the case. They got Shenault so they could. Or they can now bring in Denzel Mims too and then move on from a guy like Anderson. I don't think so, though. I think that first scenario I said where they needed more receivers so they want to keep Anderson is more likely. Marshall, on the other hand, I think they would be willing to trade him. I like the idea of Marshall too, kind of like a big slot receiver. Could be like a poor man's Juju Smith-Schuster. I like the idea of that. And a pretty good signing that just happened. I had to throw it onto this page here. The graphics guy had to throw it right on this page. Commander signed John Bostic, who used to play with the Commanders, and linebacker play's been a little underwhelming there. So get him familiar with the Ron Rivera scheme back in there makes a lot of sense. It's a pretty good pick up there. He was recently cut by the Saints. And then we had the Jalen Reagor trade. My Vikings traded for Jalen Reagor, which I was just telling other guy on the show during picks. Can't wait for picks, by the way. Picks competed just last night. That I'm like, give me Jalen Reagor. I'm like, give me him. We'll trade for him. So I feel his upside still, because I had a first round grade on him. Obviously that didn't work out, but you see the flashes of potential. We've seen it in training camp this year as well. Like he's figuring it out, keep hearing that, but the Eagles still move on from him. A little bit more of a crowded receiver room, I suppose, but the Eagles get a 7th round pick this year, so that's not that appealing, but they get a 5th round pick, which is somewhat appealing, that could turn into a 4th based on Jalen Reagor's statistics this year. So pretty interesting stuff there in this trade. And I think it's good for both teams. My grades, I gave the Vikings an A- and the Eagles an A. And the more I think about it for the Vikings, the more I like it. For them, I like taking a shot on Reagor. Maybe he just doesn't work in that Hurts offense. A lot of running the ball. And the Vikings have been running the ball too, but they're looking to pass a little bit more. They passed a lot last year as well. And more of a quarterback that can spread the ball around to different options in Kirk Cousins. So that can help with Reagor. I think he's going to come in right away as a punt returner as well. KJ Osborne really broke out last year, but Reagor has potential to kind of battle him for that receiver 3 spot. But I think right away it's going to be Reagor at receiver 4, which O'Connell coming from the Rams, they'll value having several receivers there. And Adam Thielen has had some injuries too, so it's good to have another option in there. It's interesting they have the 21st and 22nd pick from that draft, which is Reagor and Justin Jefferson there. So pretty interesting stuff. Eagles get an A because I felt like they were getting ready to move on. And the tough part is, Reagor was having a really good training camp, and they're kind of saying like he's looking a lot better. Maybe they weren't going to trade him. Maybe they were driving up the price there, but. So could he end up being good? Maybe it'll look bad on the Eagles because I could very easily see him ending up being pretty good. And this trade's going to look bad for the Eagles then, but I'm not really going to view it like that. It just felt like maybe it wasn't a fit in that style offense. Hasn't worked out yet. Felt like they were going to move on from him. And I didn't think they'd be, and they might get a 4th. So that's the thing. I like it a lot more. The difference in the 4th and the 5th, even though it's a round difference, it feels kind of significant. But if they get that 4th, that's pretty damn good. Because I never would have thought they would have got a 4th for Reagor. It's just not guaranteed yet. And then you could say, well, the Vikings a 4th. Then is that bad? But he only give a 4th if he plays as in terms of statistics. If he plays very well, give him a 4th. Usually I don't like those deals, but if he plays very well, give him a 4th, so it'd be worth it because it's not like it's a 1st or 2nd. It's worth it. And if he doesn't reach those statistics, then he gets a 5th, but it's possible that he plays, yardage-wise could be good and still worth a 5th. The only negative of the Vikings is if he plays nowhere near those numbers and he's bad, then it's a bad deal for the Vikings. So we'll see what happens there. But it makes sense for both sides. Yeah, again, last night I was like, come on, give me Reagor on the Vikings here. I kind of was feeling it. I really like the upside. They trade for Black like the other TCU guys. 2 upside guys there that I still think could revive their careers. I just didn't think this one would actually happen. Black did not surprise me. I didn't think Reagor would actually happen here for the Vikings, and it did. So Eagles been making moves like the Vikings too. These two teams are making moves like crazy lately. So interesting stuff. I'm sure there's things happening that could have been involved in this video, going on right now. So we'll get back to it on Twitter. But let me know your guys' thoughts on everything. Cool to see the comments there. But yeah, that is going to wrap up this one. Again, check us out on Twitter. There's a link down below for that. Link down below for our jewelry sponsor at Shop GLD with a 33% off code. Pretty cool stuff. Subscribe, turn notifications on. All that would be much appreciated. We got that full NFL coverage here. Cannot wait for next week and our videos leading up to next week here. So join us. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.